happening. You're trying to figure out ultimately what is.
It's still a mystery as to why it took them. Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren Conlin of Primetime Crime and Pop Crime TV, and I am here with my co-host of Primetime Crime, Jarrett Ferrantino. Hi, Jarrett.
Hey, Lauren. Hey, everyone. Good morning.
Good morning. It's Wednesday, and you know, I had spoken to Dizzy, or I spoke to Dizzy. What's the correct grammar there? Spoken to, spoke to,
Spoke with. I think spoke with Dizzy.
Oh my gosh, you're so right. Okay, thank you so much. I spoke with Dizzy, and she gave me some great feedback about our episode last week where we talked about 3 or 4 cases. We kind of went through them a bit, and these are cases in the news, relevant cases. And she made a comment, and she's like, you know, it was cool because no one's been doing that format since the Sarge, True Crime with the Sarge, Joe Giacalone, left. And I was like, that's a really good point. And I really enjoy that format as well. So I think if you're cool with it, Jarrett, we kind of discussed this, that we should keep doing that. It's nice. It's a good pace, right?
Well, look, that's how I live my life. Like it's a multiple. This week, I've actually been practicing law. Like I'm a lawyer who I've been filing motions, answering stuff. I did a deposition this week. So all different cases. So the fact that we can address multiple cases at once, that's like Xanadu to me. I love that.
Great. Well, I want to welcome everybody into the chat. Run for Justice. Hi. Yes, Dizzy, your ears are burning. Sinead, I'm sure you love what Jarrett's wearing today, or his eyebrows or something. No, I'm just giving you crap. Sheila, hi. Brooklyn, good morning. Trial Junkies, good morning. And my friend Sal, good morning. So happy to see everybody. Before we get started, I do want to comment. I think I was talking to Sinead or Simi about this on Twitter. If you guys haven't seen the Jerry Springer documentary on Netflix, please watch it. Jarrett, have you seen this?
I have it teed up. I started watching Shogun this week, which I didn't think I would like. I really like. So Jerry Springer he's next in my queue, I think. Shogun's on Hulu, though. It's not on Netflix.
Yes, my husband and my parents actually love Shogun. I feel like it's very serious. I had a hard time with it because I'm horrible. I go on my phone, and you need to see the subtitles, so I need to just focus. But
you need to actively watch that show.
Exactly. Well, the Jerry Springer one, it's only two episodes, so it's really easy to get through. I wanted more, but I was stunned at a lot of it. And I found myself walking away from it, not really sure about Jerry Springer. Everybody said he's this nice guy. He kind of went by the whole, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what we're doing. This is all the executive producer and doing this and all this stuff. And it was just, I don't know. It was interesting. But, Frank Zell's here. Hi, Frank. Good to see you. And hello, Sinead. I know I've been pinning a lot of your tweets about Jarrett your messages. I hope you don't mind. If you think I'm a jerk, please hit me up after. Jarrett, let's start here. Let's start with a Karen Reed update, your favorite. Karen Reed, she had a win. So the Judge Cannoni, did rule that Dr. Marie Russell would be allowed to testify in the second trial. After last week, that's one element. And then the other element is the fact that Michael Proctor today is going before the board, essentially, to see his future at the Massachusetts State Police. So this is crazy. But let's go to Dr. Marie Russell. You pretty much thought that she was going to be admitted, right?
Yeah, so once again, we predicted this correctly. And I don't mind talking Karen Reed when we're talking about the law instead of the merits of the case. So this is really a legal issue, whether or not. So first of all, it was a Fry-Daubert type hearing where they were kind of challenging Dr. Russell's expertise because of some of what they said was equivocation on the level of her opinion. So here's what basically the nature of the challenge was. They said there were inconsistencies with her. They said that, excuse me one second, hold on. They said there were inconsistencies. And they said that she ignored certain information in crafting her opinion. She did not compare the dentition of the German Shepherd, or had the opportunity to compare the dentition of the German Shepherd with the marking. So these are all things that really go to the weight of her opinion, not necessarily the science of the expertise, which was dentition, dog bites. And Dr. Russell, as we said, she's qualified. She was a police officer. She was an ER doc. But then Judge Bev says a couple of things in her opinion that I thought were interesting. And I want to make sure I note them. Number one, she says Dr. Russell's expertise primarily concerns treatment of dog bites, not the identification. Now, that is something that may limit the scope of Dr. Russell's testimony this time around. Judge Bev isn't overturning herself, but you have to be careful about how far afield you let an expert go. So if she says, hey, Dr. Russell, you're only an expert in treatment of dog bites, you're going to have a real limitation when Dr. Russell goes on to say, these are dog bites. So the prosecution is going to have a lot of fun with that language. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean if I'm a doctor and I'm trained to treat a particular injury, you know damn well I am also versed in identifying it. I know what it looks like when I see it. So I think Judge Bev will let that in, but she is going to allow the prosecution to really pick her apart on that issue. That's a huge piece. You know, I understand the expected loss of the prosecution. I hate to call it a loss. They have to do their job. They have to try to curtail the scope of this expertise. So I think they knew it was an overreach to try to suppress her testimony, but boy, did they maybe put guardrails on it.
So I guess I didn't catch that language, or I didn't dive deep enough into that. So I'm really glad that you pointed that out. So just, can you clarify for me? Judge Cannoni is saying that when Dr. Russell testifies, it should be clear that she can't identify the dog bites because she only has okay.
She doesn't go that far. She says that Dr. Russell's background is concerned primarily with the treatment of dog bites, not necessarily the identification. That doesn't mean she won't let her identify it. She's just kind of clipping her wings a little bit. And I don't know what is Judge Bev showing her hand here. Here's the thing. My prediction, and I think this is what's going to happen. They're going to let Dr. Russell testify. They're going to let her testify to the ID of dog bites, in her opinion, because she's seen them before. But they're going to limit how far she goes from there. Or this has opened the door for extensive cross-examination by the state on that particular issue. So here's the thing.
It's a good question, though. Look at this. How does a doctor treat without identifying? That it is kind of
well, and that's what I said.
Yeah.
But again, that is, I think they're inextricably linked. I think you're right, Dizzy. But I can't help what Judge Bev wrote. She's saying you're more so an expert. Like if somebody comes in and says a dog bit this child, okay, you have wounds. You're not concerning yourself too much with. You have some history. They're consistent with that type of injury. I think they're inextricably linked, but that note was dropped in the opinion, so you can't ignore that.
Well, you said something. You said, I don't know if Judge Cannoni is showing her hand here. I would argue that, yeah, she is. She's kind of helping the prosecution here and being like, you guys should have identified this. You guys should have.
They were saying that. They were saying some of that. But here's the most important thing you have to understand about the judge's role here. The judge is not deciding the strength or credibility of Dr. Russell's opinions. She is simply saying whether or not this is an expert that is so qualified in the field, it is a recognized field of expertise, and that this expert's testimony may aid the jury in understanding what happened here. Period. End of story. It's the prosecution's job to make the arguments they were making in these proceedings to the jury to say, Dr. Russell may be an expert, recognized by the court, but her opinions go too far. She's not an identification of injuries expert, and there are inconsistencies. And the big thing the prosecution's trying to say is, too, she failed to consider everything. She failed to consider the possibility or some of the other statements that had been provided in the case. Now, I didn't do that deep of a dive into it to know exactly what they're alleging, but I've done that where experts come in, their reports are given to you. And we said this last week, but it's important and worth renoting. When an expert makes their opinion, it's in writing and signed. As a major point of that opinion that is often overlooked is what was reviewed by the expert in generating this opinion. Oftentimes it's an interview or the entire case file. So I love when an expert says, I was paid $25,000, I reviewed the entire case file. I pull out the most minute portions of that case file. I'm like, well, you said you reviewed the entire file. This is in the file at page 1505. And you want to see somebody's heart rate go up. Try that.
Well, okay. So what do you think about this? So they are also trying to get the feds experts out of the second trial, the ARCA reconstruction experts, or as many people call them, crash daddies. I mean, it seems to me that because Hank Brennan is getting a special salary here, he's really trying to work for this salary, because you've said to me a few times, if you think you have a pretty solid case, you're like, go ahead. I don't care which experts you use. I'll debunk everything. And it seems like they are trying to, and again, they're doing their job, but they're trying to pull out Karen Reed's best experts here, or the experts that seem to really resonate with the first jury.
So I have said that about your defense. I would say, throw whatever defense you want at me, I'll debunk it. When it comes to experts, it's a little different because experts are imbued with this level of knowledge and this special treatment of the court. I mean, what better can you hear is like, you're an expert in your field. That means everybody stops and listens. I used to have these fake $9 glasses that the second an expert gets on the stand, I would put my glasses on to like send the message to the jury, like, we're in school now. We're going to learn. We got to pay extra close attention because they are imbued with a little bit of special treatment. And I have to tell you, because juries are specifically instructed about expert witnesses, they're often given a little bit more weight than they should. And here's the reality. You have to try to curtail who gets marched in there as an expert because you don't want junk science. You want, and look, Brennan is doing his job. He's making these guys earn it this time, okay? He's making Karen's team say, you want to put these experts up? They are going to be vetted legally first if they're going to be marched into that courtroom. So I get what they're trying to do. They'll be ready to deal with them if they truly believe on the merits they're wrong, but why not give them a little bit of a hard time on your way in? You got to do that.
Right. And that's what I was thinking. He's earning his paycheck. He's doing his job. And I just want to go back to Sal. You had a comment here about the dog itself. Let me see. I lost it. Okay. If they know where the dog is, why don't they do a bite wound dental matchup? I've heard rumors. They are clearly unsubstantiated. Dizzy, you might know, but I've heard they might bring the dog in or something like that for the next trial. And when I say bring the dog in, I do mean get some testing done or something. But the thing is, I feel like they can't. I mean, John O'Keefe, he's been buried. They'd have to exhume his body for this, and I think that's not going to happen because the family,
unless there was a way to do that visually with the photographs. Because it's those injuries are well documented via photograph. Here's the problem, okay?
Yeah.
Let's just say, and this is an opinion or a thought, if they aren't clearly bite marks and you're not matching dentition markings and x-rays to actual bite marks, then their strategy would be to not do that. They would say, we haven't done that. The dog can't be located. And I know there's rampant speculation online as to where the dog is now or is no longer. There's people that say the dog isn't around or that they got rid of the dog on purpose. here's the thing. You would be comparing those records to a photograph at this point. I do not believe they're going to exhume John O'Keefe for that purpose.
No, the family would never, like,
No.
yeah, you think they'd sign off and be like, sure, let's exhume our son, our brother, our cousin. So for Karen Reed's defense, they definitely would not. But early on, when I was covering this case, I had a special guest, Dr. Henry Lee, on my podcast, The Outlier, and I wanted him to go over John O'Keefe's injuries, specifically his arm. And Dr. Lee said that based on a photograph, and I'd have to go back and listen to this episode, and I have it transcribed somewhere, but he said you can't tell based on a picture because of the dimensions. He said you just can't. You need it, you need to see this in person, because a photograph will not tell you exactly, if it's these wounds are 4-dimensional or whatever. He made all these comments. You need the clothing to match up. You need all of these elements to determine what these are. And that simply was not done initially, because why
so
would
if that's not done, like, and believe me, who am I to argue with Dr. Lee? He's the best. But so if that's not done, and looking at these photos, you're going to be hard pressed to make that comparison at this point. So, and if you do that and you only use the photos, right? And Dr. Russell was to do that, then she is subject to cross-examination and the weight of that evidence based on everything you said Dr. Lee did. You would say you were unable to do a 4-dimensional scan. They'll say, hey, we did a scan of the photograph, all kind of stuff they could say. But you would say there's nothing better than comparing John O'Keefe's sleeve, John O'Keefe's x-ray, depth measurements of the wounds, all that stuff. I mean, obviously that will go a long way in what weight a jury would give that evidence. So hearing what Dr. Lee said, it would be tough to do it without it, but they got away with it the first time. So it came in.
Right.
I don't know that the prosecution's going to let certain things go without answering them this time, which is what I've been saying.
Right. And it sounds like, Simi, you have your tinfoil hat on here, where you might not believe these imprints are actually Chloe. But I mean, I would hope, my goodness, I would hope they would be truthful here. But just quickly, Jarrett, with Michael Proctor going in front of the board today, and his fate literally could be determined today. I mean, we don't know. It could take a while for them to make a decision, or it could be fast. If you dealt with a police officer on a case, you obviously worked, as an ADA. If you dealt with a police officer like Michael Proctor, what would you think is the right thing to do here in this situation? Should he be fired because of his conduct and because of what has happened after, where other cases are being questioned? In my opinion, this reflects you at the DA's office. Now you're like, well, wait, a bunch of my cases could be all effed up now, and that wasn't my fault. That's this guy's fault. So, I mean, what are your thoughts here, Karen Reed trial aside, as to what they should do with this guy?
Well, I don't think you could put the Karen Reed trial aside in considering what ultimately what happens to Proctor. So Proctor is going before a captain and 2 lieutenants of the Massachusetts State Police. That's the panel. As I said, my experience is if you ascend to the rank of captain and lieutenant in the state police of whatever jurisdiction, I happen to know several captains and lieutenants. These are extremely serious people. They are people that have followed the rules. They are people who are very much by the book. They typically, and this is not me being naive, they are held to a higher standard to achieve those ranks in state police in Massachusetts, particularly in Pennsylvania. Let me say this, they're 9 out of 10 times no nonsense people. They are not going to have a lot of tolerance for some of Proctor's behavior, the subject matter of the texts, the disrespect for the confidential nature of the investigation, the fact that his lack of professionalism, which is just pounded into their brains as they're trained, this lack of a modicum of respect for a dead police officer, the rights of Karen Reed, all of those things are really the big picture items that Proctor is being held against. They're saying, Michael, in addition to sending inappropriate text, who hasn't been vulgar in a text? Who hasn't said things they wish they haven't said? Okay, that there's more to it than this. Your lack of professionalism has put the prosecutions of very, very important and significant cases in jeopardy. That's the issue. And when you have a captain and two lieutenants weighing that, they're not playing. They are going to consider this as a very serious matter, and he is going to be subject to discipline, very likely termination, because of just the amount of stuff. I mean, it wasn't one incident. It wasn't an errant comment. And it continued to snowball. Their conduct with the media was inappropriate. Their vulgarity with the media was inappropriate. Like he has routinely shown a lack of professionalism, which is going to hinder his ability to maintain his position with the state police.
Right. And it is really interesting that right here, the trial board proceedings are not made public, which, I mean, look, I think the public has a right to know, especially if it is a state trooper or involving a civil servant. Why doesn't the public have a right to watch this or to be a part of this when trials are streamed and these town board meetings are streamed? Why would something like this be private?
Typically and I represent some government entities currently and have previously done that. Typically personnel matters are like the last morsel of private conduct. So you're right to say oftentimes these types of proceedings are public. Okay. But here's the thing. Proctor is a state employee. Personnel records could involve confidential matters, which could mean ongoing investigations, matters of personnel confidence, and personal issues of Michael Proctor. So it is literally the last bastion of, other than healthcare records, personnel records are regarded as confidential traditionally. Is that the right thing? I mean, I don't know. Who am I to say? But typically they are held with a certain confidential regard.
I just feel like if it was me and it was, I guess, my town, my state, I would want to know what's going on with the people that are supposed to be there to serve and protect me. I really would. I would want to know if I thought that people in the area were in danger or if they were just at risk for at risk of anything at this point. I get what you're saying, and that makes perfect sense when it comes to personal issues and things like that and possibly ongoing investigations. But I don't know. It doesn't sit right with me that the public can't listen to any of this.
Well, and there's no doubt the ramifications of what Proctor is alleged to have done have public consequences. There's no doubt. Yeah. I mean, so yes, I mean, if ever there's a public right to know, it's in a case like this. But I'm telling you, courts, like even in FOIA requests, and you're an expert on this, FOIA requests, personnel records and personnel investigations are held with this holy sanctity that you just can't get at them. It's a blanket objection to those kind of requests. You make those requests. I deal with requests like that pretty regularly. So that's really where it stems from.
Yes. And Dizzy had a great point about the Brian Walsh case. And I've said this a million times, and I've covered the Brian Walsh, or I should say Anna Walsh. I've covered that case on The Outlier, where I do a lot more storytelling and break down what's going on. And I mean, it's such a horrific case. And the fact that Brian Walsh could be getting wins before his trial because of Michael Proctor's previous conduct, it makes me sick to my stomach, because Anna Walsh, she deserves justice just like John O'Keefe does. And in my opinion, the evidence against Brian Walsh, stemming from just his lack of transparency to police and sending them on this wild goose chase, to his Google searches, how to hide a body, it's so ridiculous, on his toddler son's iPad. And we're going to sit here and give him wins in court because of Michael Proctor. It's disgusting. It's so horrible.
Well, and again, I think if you paper over Proctor in that investigation, there are enough pieces of evidence of Walsh that he's got some heavy lifting to do in his own right. but you can't blame these individuals for trying to take advantage. I mean, anytime I've had a police officer run afoul of the law, and I've had it happen, all of a sudden the house of cards starts to crumble. Or we've had judges go bad in Luzerne County, where all of a sudden every decision this judge ever made is being scrutinized because they had broke bad. They were a corrupt judge or things of that nature. So you have to almost now look at everything that Proctor's done in the past or that's pending. That's the big thing. Walsh is a pending case. So you may not, this panel really isn't in a position to fully assess the ramifications of Proctor's conduct. But you make a good point. There are cases pending in jeopardy, cases in the past in jeopardy, and who knows what ongoing investigations are still to come that Proctor's conduct could have impacted. So, or not come because of it. So he's got big problems, and he is, you cannot. The Massachusetts State Police have fallen into ill repute publicly because partially of Proctor's behavior. What happens is they're given the opportunity to make an example of him, and they will, in an effort to rebuild their reputation.
I think you're right. And I hope we find out today. I'm just curious, and I would like to just put the whole Proctor drama aside.
We won't find out today.
You don't think so? Okay. All right.
No. There'll be an opinion issue or something.
A lot of the reports, the local reports, said we could find out as soon as today. So I took that as, they're used to dealing with this type of stuff. But maybe because this case is a bit more high profile and there's a lot more elements involved with Michael Proctor, you're right. Maybe we won't. But let's move from Boston. Let's move to New York. Why don't we? And we can discuss the disappearance of Long Island teenager Emma Gervasi, who has been found safe. She's recovering, I believe, in a facility somewhere in Long Island. I don't know the exact details, and I don't think that we are meant to know all of the details here because
I don't know if anyone knows the exact details of this one, but
yes, and this one is really interesting, and it is really it's bothering me a bit, but I also don't want to jump to any conclusions. But over the weekend, I did go down a rabbit hole. I sent a few videos to our favorite statement analysis guys like Jack Fox, Peter Hyatt. And I was just like, do you find some of these statements made by family members, mainly dad, just a little strange? I'm not accusing anybody. I just find them to be strange. And they said yes. And they pinpointed a few things about the statements that were odd.
Were his face tattoos discussed at all or no?
So no, the only tattoo that was discussed was the 666 on his neck, which is a tough one. So Dizzy, I hear this. I disagree with this, but except for the ankle monitor, I believe yes, she cut it off and possibly she ran away. But I don't know if dad is necessarily covering for her, but I think he's covering for himself, because if I just want to just state my opinion here, speculating opinion, not trying to cause any problems, but if I had to guess, I would think that it could be a JonBenet situation here where, the DA has said that they are, they have made an arrest. I'm jumping ahead, but it's an ongoing investigation. If dad is somehow arrested later, it could be because of a type of neglect charge, meaning that dad possibly introduced his minor daughter to the people she ran away with, or dad knew of these people, he ran in the same circle. I'm not sure, but what I do know is after looking into this, dad rhymes with corn. He is a Corn Hub star. He has an account. It's very public. It's easily found. And dad also commented on her Instagram account, Jarrett. And I can show this to you guys, but
yeah, I don't think we have to show other than the fact that
it's weird. I can show my tweets basically, but like her Instagram from when she was probably 10 years old, it was scary. She was posing like an adult in a swimsuit, and it was a little concerning, I guess, that these pictures were up in general. It just felt very overly sexualized. And yeah, Trish, not sus at all, right? Without trying to accuse anybody of anything. Now, she disappeared in December for about 3 weeks. And this is Dad said she was looking for something in the house. They live in Patchogue, Long Island. She was a student, or is a student, at Patchogue Medford High School. I believe she's a freshman. She was looking for something and she didn't have her shoes on. She was just hanging out around the house, and she went outside to check and see if something that she was looking for was outside. But somebody pulled up, and Dad said either she was lured or she got in the car willingly, but she was wearing an ankle monitor. And again, records are sealed here. He said she was wearing it because she had some drug problems, I guess, and the court had her wear this. I mean, I don't know if that's a thing, Jarrett, minors wearing ankle monitors over drug issues or not, but there was just a lot of conflicting statements, like, oh, she never would run away. Oh, well, she's run away before. And then in these videos that he was making leading up to finding her, or her being found, there would be different messages like, come home, you're not in trouble. And then it would be like, whoever took her, I'm going to find you. And I think maybe that's valid if it's a teenager and you know your teenager. But Dad said he got a tip from a woman, and the woman told him that Emma was on this boat in Islip, in East Islip, I believe, which is not too far from where she lives. And so Dad said that he wasn't sure if this tip was valid. So he went over there himself, and he pulls Emma off the boat himself.
And claims to have called the police while he was on the way, correct?
So I don't know exactly. Did you hear him say that? Because I didn't hear him say that.
No, it was reported in the Post that way.
I don't necessarily think that's true, only because I joined a couple groups about this, and I was actually kicked out of a group. It's so weird because the people that run these groups are very young, and I'm over here asking questions. I should have just sat quietly and listened. And it was just funny. But there were some pictures that were released that apparently he took of her after, and she was walking by the boat. She didn't look like she was in any type of distress. But again, I just don't have enough information here. So I guess he's being hailed as this hero dad. I mean, if you see these headlines, they're comparing him to Liam Neeson in Taken, and Dr. Phil had him on the show. But his Facebook account, and now Dad has a YouTube account, Jarrett, that he's trying to send everyone to. It's me. You all would break under this pressure that I'm under. I mean, it's really odd, Jarrett, very odd. And
yeah, I mean,
the last thing I'll say is that he jumped to the conclusion that his daughter was trafficked. Law enforcement has said nothing about her being trafficked at all. But that would be the last thing I would want to assume, because also there was footage of her knocking on motel room doors like the day after she went missing, and then she disappeared again. So he's saying she was trafficked, and then he named a POI and put it on his Facebook before the POI was arrested. So they did arrest the boat owner, Francis Buckheit, and then last Friday, Francis Buckheit, his attorney, the headline on the Post was, "There's more to the story." Okay, go ahead.
Okay, well, I don't even know where to start here, other than we can't ignore the fact that Buckheit was arrested. So that's a huge thing. There's a third party involved here. So whatever, now, is Dad's behavior odd? You know, in 2025, a guy whose 14-year-old daughter he believes was trafficked, she clearly was missing for a month through the holidays, has had great difficulty in her young life. He, by his own admission, was addicted to drugs. Now he's using this as an opportunity to spike the football and become a media darling. is concerning in and of itself. I don't know that that's in Emma Ray's best interest at all, if anybody's thinking about her best interests. So here's what I'm immediately thinking. When Buckwright's cell phone records are dumped, okay, you're going to have, they're going to look for any connection to Emma Ray prior to the date she went missing. What connection, just like Kohlberger, what connection, if any, did he have? Was she being stalked? Was she being groomed? Was this a planned escape out of Dad's house? What information did this individual have? Like, did he just happen upon her and then, have a boat? And like, did a 65-year-old man happen upon a 14-year-old girl who happened to step outside? Again, we talked about there's no such thing as coincidences. And this is not me judging. Look, Dad is obviously, he's heavily tattooed. He's a pretty articulate guy, interesting guy. This is not a judgment on him, other than to say, if there's more to the story, it will be discovered. It's not something that's going to be buried here. His conduct is curious to me, just that he's wanting to be in the spotlight. But if it is what it is, I mean, how can you not respect the fact that he goes onto that boat by himself and saves her? I think if that's true, that's a great story, and he is Liam Neeson. I have my doubts or suspicions about what was really going on here all the way around. I think there's going to be more to the story. I think there's going to be a more profound connection of this Frank to the rest of Emma Ray and some ongoing thing. And again, I don't know. I'm in no position to make an assessment against Dad. The fact that Dad has, this adult film connection or internet connection, that in and of itself, I mean, these things are more common now than ever. But again, it's not something that looks great for Dad either. So.
Right. And MS-13 is very relevant in Long Island, and Tren de Aragua is very relevant in Manhattan. I have heard rumors that people have brought this up. Could he be? And he is not affiliated with any type of gang, to my knowledge. Now, there are also unsubstantiated rumors that things were going on with Emma in terms of like the ankle monitor thing. Yes, she had some issues, but she was possibly going to be a witness in another trial involving some shady characters. This is unsubstantiated, but multiple people in the area have stated this, that are close to this case or to this family. I mean, I just have a pit in my stomach for this girl in terms of what I've seen on social media. The fact that she has a different hairstyle a lot. I mean, it's when I say a different hairstyle, I mean, and this could be nothing. People could be like, oh yeah, Lauren, something bad happened because she has different hairstyles. No, hear me out. Like, it's like she'll have really, really curly hair, and then it'll be really long and straight. And then the neck, it's almost like different looks, if you will, if you know what I'm getting at here.
Well, and that could be indicative of somebody struggling with their identity too. I mean, okay. Is she, that's one thing. Or you're saying, is she modeling for something? Is she, and that's possible too. But it's often, she's 14. First of all, she's a baby. I mean, she's 14. Like, to be a witness in a criminal, my God, I mean, this girl's had a tough run by her dad's own admission. And she's been, and if what Dad says is true, she was being trafficked, about to be trafficked on the waterways. She was missing for 4 weeks. If these folks had bad intentions, you can imagine they were effectuated over that period of 4 weeks. But then Dad said something like, the most important thing is that she's found. It's like, yeah, that's true. But we also got to find out what happened. Like, you punish somebody for stealing a horse. This is the tradition, but you also punish them so they don't steal more horses. You know what I'm saying? That was like the tradition in the West. So that, like, we need to know what happened. It's great that she's found, and that's wonderful that she's alive and hopefully will be well. But who was involved? We got a 14-year-old who falls off the face of the earth for a month, and a dad who finds her, and now we start doing the investigation and the deep dives.
Well, and look, he stated that she was on the boat alone and she wasn't tied up. She wasn't, I mean, again, I don't know. There's not enough information, but that alone, and then the pictures that I've seen where she's casually walking, I'm like, what's going on here? And then you have this coupled with the fact that dad is now this missing teen slash child trafficking advocate, where he's constantly posting about other children being missing and how he's so wonderful because he gets up and goes to the gym every morning and deals with all of this. Oh, and then the most important thing about 5 minutes into the video is Emma Ray needs to recover. And I'm kind of like, I mean, again, I hate talking like this because I know that everyone reacts differently, but can you imagine you go through this ordeal and you're every day, your main focus here is to do a video and some kind of like, you know, we need to save all the, it's kind of like, really? You can just jump like so quickly to, so also because Emma Ray was so young living there and he has this Corn Hub account and it's like, it's at their house. You can tell they're at it looks like it's most likely their house. I guess I'm speculating and jumping to conclusions there. But if you're living in an environment like that, shady people are most likely invited to your home because I saw on the account, just to add some context here, he put his email and he said that he and his wife are looking for people to join them. So think of the people that are in and out of that house, which is why I went to the Jean grand jury thing. It might not mean that he's responsible for a kidnapping per se, or he's involved with this. However, it could be a neglect thing where he has let these people around his minor. And then when I saw her Instagram and you know, it could be just like he doesn't get it, but she's like deep throating an ice cream cone and he's like, you're so adorable. I mean, it's Jarrett.
I mean, look, there's some odd behavior here. There's no doubt. And I think that we cannot be the only ones talking or looking into this, and I think that these more details are going to come out here.
I don't know, Jarrett, because everyone's treating it like, and I don't. That's why I feel weird because I'm like, we can't be the only ones. But wouldn't someone like the Post or Daily Mail? I'm not that good of a detective here that to see this Corn Hub account. Why have they not? What is going? You know what I'm saying? Like, so maybe.
Well, it's referenced the adult film connection is referenced in, I think it was the Post article at the bottom.
Was it? Okay,
yeah.
I missed that then.
Yeah, I think it was referenced. So again, if this is not, the police don't get a case like this and say, oh, it's as dad said it was. We have our person responsible. Mm-hmm. It's over. I mean, his lawyers are actually saying at this point, the defendant's lawyers are actually saying there's more to this. My experience is lawyers don't just make those kind of claims. There's got to be something. What that is, who knows? Right. And time will tell. But we have to continue to. I mean, there's much more to this story, I think, to come.
I agree. And I called his lawyer yesterday. I called her office early in the morning and left a message. And you know, she probably can't say anything, but something else that I meant to do is I meant to call the ice slip, the boat slip where she was found. There has to be cameras there, Jarrett. So I'm wondering, because there are all these different comments on Reddit and all these things. And I take them with a grain of salt, but I've read things like, oh, dad was at that boat slip earlier that month when she went missing. He looked for her there, like all these things. And I'm kind of like, okay, well, a lot of this stuff can be proven, you know, through surveillance or through whatever. So I'm trying to figure this out. Yeah. But they did charge Frances Buckheit. I saw yesterday. I was looking for the indictment or at least the probable cause arrest affidavit. It's not available, but I saw they charged him with rape. And you guys know what I'm talking about. And he's a 65-year-old man, and she's a 14-year-old girl. I mean, I'm heartsick over this situation and this poor girl, what she's gone through. I'm assuming for most of her life. And again, just living in a house like that, if that's how you grow up, Jarrett, you don't know anything different. That's not her fault. I'd probably be I don't know. I have all these thoughts, and I guess I don't want to go off because nothing is proven, and I would hate to accuse anyone falsely, but just had to bring all this up.
Well, it's an interesting case, like I said, and I think that there is more to come. It will be interesting to see what posture this defense takes and whether or not Dad and his lifestyle factors into what happened previously to and during her kidnapping and rescue.
Yeah, because I don't want to shame anyone for making money off corn hub. I'm sorry. I'm learning, Jarrett. You'll see I'm learning that there's certain things you can't say on YouTube because they will censor your content and they will not put you in the algorithm. So you get less exposure. Right. So I'm trying to be better about that, about my language, which is very difficult for me, as you know. But I'll stop, and I will not make any assumptions. I'm going to continue doing the best that I can in looking into this case. But like we've said, it's an ongoing investigation, and it's going to be tough to get information. However, I'm very interested in the charging docs, the probable cause affidavit. I would like to. I mean, I got to check and see, but I would like to go out to like one of his hearings. It's probably 2 hours from me, but
one thing I would say though, about if I was prosecuting this case, I would caution Dad. I would say, look, do you want this person to be properly brought to justice? You need to be very careful. Go be a victim's advocate. Go fight on behalf of other children you believe may be trafficked. And if this is the case, go ahead. But be very careful about what you're saying about Emma Ray's case publicly, because what you're saying, if it doesn't comport with the evidence that is eventually meted out, could come back to haunt you. And we don't want that. You have to caution people. It's like, you're not governed by the rules of professional conduct that the prosecutors are, or the rules of prosecutorial conduct. You have to be careful about what is said about her case publicly before a trial. And not only because it could hurt the jury process, you're making contentions that if you can't back it up, if I'm the defense, I'm playing those strange statements in court and saying, isn't there more to that? I would just be playing it up.
Yes, absolutely. And it sounds like, if I had to guess, Jarrett, I would say that law enforcement most likely is not going to be in constant communication with him anymore. Number one, because I feel like, again, he pointed out the POI when you're really not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to sit there, and if you have an idea and police are zeroing in, you're really not supposed to go there. And then number two, because they are possibly just looking into other factors of her life, they're interviewing her, I'm sure. They're going through Buckheit's digital footprint. And also, just closing this up, I do feel like if this is my life and I'm Emma Ray, I don't want my dad blabbing if I was trafficked or if I was, that's horrible. She has to live with it. This is her business. And that's not great for healing, in my opinion.
Right. Oftentimes, most times, a minor victim of something like this, her name and identity is kept, their name and identity is kept confidential under the Rape Shield protection because, number one, it's an extremely private matter. And number two, you don't want to have a chilling effect of Emma Ray testifying down the road and beginning her process to heal. This is the Rape Shield law. And the fact that not only is she a victim of rape, she's a minor. So it's, again, this case has got a lot of moving parts. It's going to be interesting. And the photograph you're showing is from the Post too. I mean, this has become national news.
Oh, so, yeah, it has. And I mean, I got to listen. I haven't listened to the full Dr. Phil podcast, but I'm like, wait, I'm also surprised that Dr. Phil had him on so quickly because I'm pretty sure the behavioral analysts are on Merritt Street Media. And I got to say, those guys would take one look at one of his videos and be like, okay, no, there's a problem. But maybe
well, Dr. Phil's no dummy. Maybe who knows what's up his sleeve? He's no dummy.
No, that's what I'm saying. It's so bizarre. But anyway,
he was fantastic. He was great to work with on. I didn't work with him, but for the Brittany Drexel case, Dr. Phil had done a show or two on Brittany's case and really kept, and Nancy Grace did too, but you never know what his motivations are. He's no fool. And, he's a clinical psychologist. So he knows the psychology behind what could be going on here too. So I
Yes.
trust that Dr. Phil, is not blind to the fact that there could be much more to this story.
I guess I do too, because he's called people out on statements and things they've said that don't exactly make sense. But it's I guess you're right. We'll wait and see. I pray for her. I hope she's okay. And I hope, I hope dad stops making these videos for her sake. It's just drawing negative attention in my opinion, but you can do whatever you want. And Trishy, I did text Peter Hyatt. He is, he has cancer right now. He's announced that publicly. So I just told him, I was like, look, I know that you're going through it, you're getting treatment, so don't worry about this. But if you have time, this is a really good case for you to dive into. So I think
good distraction.
Yeah, exactly. And just quickly, Jarrett, I sometimes think the concept of POI was created to reduce criticism of law enforcement when they have not found the guilty party. Am I correct, or is it just me who thinks this?
So yeah, I think it was created to reduce. So your question is, you think it was created to reduce criticism of law enforcement when they have not found the guilty party? So that's a very loaded question, because you're talking about standards of suspicion. So when we talk about a person of interest could be a witness, somebody that may have seen something. And when you say that, it doesn't come with the negative connotation. You wouldn't say guilty party, you would say suspect, right? Or wanted, somebody who graduates to the level of wanted. Person of interest really allows for maybe a comfort level on that person's sentiment. So that person could be sitting there saying, well, I'm only a person of interest at this point. I could explain my way out of this. They don't have everything yet. Or it will cause them to act in a way that will, somebody could flee when they're named as a person of interest, which becomes relevant evidence. So it is a lesser standard than someone who is charged or suspect. And we used to get into these fights all the time where defense attorneys would say, you were the person of interest. You were the cops had their man. They weren't looking at anybody else. And these are terms of art. There's really not legal significance to it under the law, person of interest. But the way it's used in the press is you don't need a lot to become a person of interest, as opposed to what is required to become a guilty party or a suspect.
That was a loaded question. My goodness. Well, we can put Emma Ray aside for now, and we can close our show with an update on the Veronica Butler and Jillian Kelly case, because the last defendant has waived his right to a speedy trial. He went to court on Monday, but prior to going to court on Monday, and I believed, because we discussed on our last show, I believed that they were going to try to mark down a trial date for him. And then a few days prior to that, he waived his right to a speedy trial. So I think a lot of people are, I don't want to say confused, but they're definitely concerned about what this all means, Jarrett, because at this point, everybody has waived their right to a speedy trial. All 5 defendants, we know 2, if not 3 of them, I'm now including Cole Twombly, is trying to work out some kind of plea deal so they don't go to trial and they just plead guilty. But then, you have Tiffany and Tad here, who have recently waived their rights to a speedy trial. Tad was the last one. Tiffany was the second to last one. Me personally, knowing and experiencing the DA's office there, I would say that the DA is trying to work out deals for them in order to not take this to trial. That's what I think at this point.
So 1 trial versus 5 on this one is still a Herculean lift. Here's the difference between Tad and the other 4. Tad didn't waive his preliminary hearing. He took what you were there. I mean, he took that preliminary hearing. Everyone else said, the hell with trying to defend myself at this level, waive the hearing, go on to move the charges up to the big courthouse. And Mr. DA, I'm waiving my right to a speedy trial. So Tad could be waiving his right to a speedy trial, acknowledging the size of the file, the fact that it's going to take time, the fact that his own lawyers have a lot of work to do, you're not going to get to trial within the constitutional speedy trial rule. However, it could also signal that Tad is also going to resolve the case. As we've discussed, the evidence against all of them is overwhelming. It's very strong. You have a very hard time you're going to have a very hard time in overcoming this evidence in this case. So he could be that he was the last man standing. He could be signaling that there is a resolution in the offing. But I take what Tad did with a little bit of a grain of salt as opposed to the other four, because he did attempt to defend himself at a preliminary hearing. And there's no indication at this point that he's willing to plead yet.
Right. I guess you're right. I guess it's just very frustrating, I would imagine, for the families here, because it feels like justice is never coming because these guys are just pushing everything off. And I don't know. I personally think that regardless of any of the defendants' involvement in this, I think they all deserve life in prison, if not Tad and Tiffany getting death. And I don't want to play God or anything like that. But do you think at the next, let's say the next hearing for the next defendant, I believe it's Paul and Cora.
Paul.
Okay, yes, in February. What do you think is going to happen? I mean, because you even said it, until they either get a trial marked down for Tiffany and Tad, and or until they get their plea deals worked out, these guys can't plea out. They can't get convicted, right? And they can't get their deal.
Well, they could plead. They can't get. They shouldn't be sentenced because, as I said, the sentence would be held over them to keep them compliant with their testimony. So, if I'm the DA in this case, I want to start locking these pleas in to show everybody that there's been a deal made. They're not walking back that deal. This is happening. It sends a message to Tad and says, hey, the house of cards is coming down. These guys are pleading. You need to follow suit here. So, but to your point, you said justice is not coming in this case. Speedy trial waiver by a defendant is actually a good thing, though, Lauren, because
really?
The DA doesn't have to rush to a trial. Yeah, I mean, it's actually, if you're the DA, you want a defendant to waive that right, so you have you can breathe a little easier as you prepare. The last thing you want to do, and it happens, is to get caught up in some speedy trial motion where the DA blew a deadline and the charges get tossed. So the family should rest assured and say, hey, look, the speedy trial is one less issue we have to worry about. They've made a knowing voluntary waiver of that right. What does it mean for the big picture for Tad? I don't know. I'm starting to figure, though, it looks like all of these folks are going to plead out.
Dizzy makes a point here. I think they would have already had to declare death penalty. Is that the case? Would they have had to say this? And first of all, by the way, I don't think that the DA is going to keep death penalty on the table, because he has known some of these defendants for a very long time. I want to go as far to say he has kind of helped them out in previous cases. I think I've brought up the fact that Tad was arrested for feloniously pointing a firearm, which carries a 1 to 10 year sentence in Oklahoma, and he walked away scot-free. And there's a very short difference in pointing a firearm and becoming a murderer. I think that the DA doesn't want to prosecute these people, Jarrett. I think he does not want to put the death penalty on the table for anybody. And I just don't think that I get what you're saying makes perfect sense for another case. In this case, I don't think that he thinks this is necessarily a good thing, the DA. I think he wants to be done with this because he feels so uncomfortable. That's how I feel. My opinion.
So to answer Disney's question first, when is it typically declared? When is notice of death?
Yes.
Before formal arraignment in Pennsylvania and in many states. I believe in Oklahoma, they have the right to announce they're seeking death at that formal arraignment, what happens at the big courthouse. It hasn't happened yet. So they could technically still seek it, I believe. In most states, you could at this stage. Here's the question. the question is this a death penalty case? What about this case makes it a death? Does it meet any aggravators? And here's the answer. Absolutely. There's torture here. There's kidnapping here. There's multiple victims here. There are felony criminal convictions in the past for some of the defendants. There's a claim that Veronica would have been a witness against Tiffany in an upcoming court proceeding, so she could have been taken out. Arguably, Jillian was a court official as a supervising. So there are a lot of things. There are a lot of things here that would allow for this case to meet the criteria of multiple aggravating circumstances for death. However, this is a deeply religious community. Okay. Oftentimes, so as a DA, when you're considering, and I've considered this fact or multiple factors, when you're looking at a case and you're saying, should we seek death? You consider a lot of different variables. You consider the culture of your community. You consider the nature of the crime. Clearly, in this case, it's there. Nature of the crime. You consider the victim's opinions, the victim's family's opinions. What do they want? All of those things cooked together factor into that decision. None of them are dispositive. I look at this case and I look at their conduct, and in my opinion, their lives should hang in the balance based on what they premeditated. They premeditated this. The nature of the conspiracy, the nature of the crime, it should absolutely be a death case. But oftentimes, you pull death off the table in exchange for a plea too. That could be what the DA is saying to these folks.
Well, we know that he was doing that with Paul, but if this is you, right, and you're prosecuting this, you got what you needed from Paul. And in my opinion, from hearing this in person, I felt like that was enough. You just need one guy here, okay? Would you have already declared or filed to seek the death penalty for this case by now?
It depends what's going on behind the scenes, but Paul was the first to the table for a deal, so his deal would have been better. And then they progressively, it's a downward trend, like things trend downward from there. So Tiffany would have been second to the table. Her deal would have been less, and she was more involved. And then Cora came to the table. So like with every passing one, the deal gets less sweet for each defendant. So I would, if I'm having good discussions with Tad and they're involving the death penalty, I wouldn't necessarily say publicly I'm going to seek death and then have to walk that back, because if you know ultimately you're going to pull it, why go there? Why go there? You just say, look, it was discussed with Tad and his counsel. It was not sought publicly because we have been in communications through this whole process that in exchange for not having to put the family through a trial, what is essentially a life in prison sentence, we would forego the pursuit of the death penalty.
Yeah, and I commented on this last week when he waived his right to a speedy trial, because I'm thinking, and it's probably because I am reading the oral history of Rikers Island, where no defendant at Rikers would ever waive their right to a speedy trial, because living in Rikers is like living in a hellhole. It's like literally living in hell. So I kind of speculated they must have a really sweet deal in the Texas County Jail. It must be very comfortable where, you know, it's lax, it's small. They probably can communicate with each other like we've discussed. It must be fine. It must be completely fine. And that is a better option than possibly being sent to a prison, God knows where. Am I right? Or is that just me?
Yeah, I mean, that may be why, but his own lawyers could be telling him to do that. Like I've had so many times where defendants have waived Rule 600 because they acknowledge part of what's going to cause the delay is our own testing of the evidence, their own testing of the evidence. So things like that. So, you know, and there's other things that have happened, like defenses are asking for continuances. And I would say, look, I'm not doing anything until I get that waiver. And so the lawyers go to them and say, look, we want this. You know, Ferentino wants a waiver of Rule 600, and they go in court and they waive it. Brian Kohlberger waived it. Brian Kohlberger waived his right to a speedy trial too. And you would say, well, why in the blue hell, if Brian was so, what did he say? He's anxious about getting himself acquitted, whatever his quote was. So I think that it's hard to really go into the mindset of Tad or his lawyers to figure exactly what's behind that. But my
Yeah,
bet is
you're right.
there's a deal coming with all these folks.
I think so too. I think so too. And my heart just, it continues to go out to the families here who have to deal with this. And again, I don't know what all of them are thinking. So I don't, it's none of my business. It really isn't. And my speculation is just my speculation based on the research that I've done. But I couldn't help but think, like, man, if these guys were sitting in a place like Rikers, it would just be a bit different. They would want to get the hell out.
Here's the one thing I will say, that the one looking at this case, and you and I have looked at this case extensively, looking at Tad right now, if he takes a deal, he forever forecloses the opportunity to take the defense that he did this because of some allegation of abuse, and he took the law into his own hands, and he believed he was doing the right thing, and he's some kind of a hero. He's going to forever close the opportunity, and he has got nothing to lose. So why, they were always, like even Paul said, he was manipulated. Tad, in our theory, was doing the manipulating. So he believes what he was doing was right, and he's going to lose the opportunity to plead that.
I mean, it's kind of been, the abuse though has been kind of debunked here in court. Definitely during the pretrial. So I guess I'm kind of like, how do you think you can still use that when it's been debunked?
I'd imagine he's a pretty stubborn guy.
Yeah,
I've committed to that, just from what I've seen. So, but again, I don't know the man, but
yeah, I've heard
I know enough people to kind of figure it out.
I've heard he's so narcissistic that he does think there is a chance that a jury would not convict him here.
Right.
And again, that's crazy.
Which ultimately the decision to take a deal is his. So if he sees this small chance that he could be acquitted, and I'm not saying he could be, I'm saying if he is truly a narcissist, he's not going to forego the opportunity to plead his case. Right.
All right. Well, this was a very informative episode, in my opinion. Here, I enjoyed discussing all of these cases, Jarrett, and I obviously we always follow up on Karen Reed and the Kansas Moms case, but I do want to keep a very close eye on the Emma Gervasi case, and I will definitely be praying for her recovery and also for her safety, her ongoing safety.
And I live vicariously through your tweets. I'll follow the case that way too.
Great. Please do. And I debated tweeting about that case, by the way, because I just didn't want to jump to any conclusions, but I couldn't help myself. I'm like, let me just get all my thoughts out here because I just feel very confused. So I hope I did it in an ethical manner, just sort of raising some red flags that I found to be odd without pointing fingers, or I guess pointing to guilt. I definitely pointed fingers at oddities.
I get what you're saying, and I think that certain things need to be considered here.
Yes, definitely. All right. So guys, we will see you next week, most likely same time or around the same time. We love these little coffee lives going through all these cases. I really enjoy it. So I hope you guys do too. Thanks. Bye, Jarrett.
Thanks. Happening, you're trying to figure out ultimately what is
it's still a mystery as to why it took them